Hi, Dr. Randy. Good day to you.
Good morning, Ryan.
We're here again in our weekly podcast, and in today's podcast, I'm very curious to learn about this topic called emotional reactivity. So, can you further explain to me and to everybody in the audience?
I would absolutely love to. Um, First of all, everybody in every relationship gets upset at times, sometimes very upset. They're under too much pressure, their life is too toxic, they don't have enough resources to match the demands. There are too many crises in a row, they don't feel well, and they explode. Emotional reactivity is a tendency to explode. All of a sudden, you just can't take anymore and you just let it rip. And you let it rip at whomever has the dubious honor of being close to you. You let it rip. But it doesn't happen all the time. You generally can see it coming. The person feels very apologetic afterwards. Um, you know, there's it comes, as I said, from prolonged stress. You can see it coming. And when these people blow up like this or get upset, they will take nurturing afterwards. I'm so sorry. I need a hug. Things are just not going very well for me. I'm really sorry. And it can happen out of nowhere, but usually, as I said, you can see it sort of building. The person will get more irritable. They have lower frustration tolerance. You can see them kind of snapping a little bit. It's like they're being, pushed into a corner by life, and it's really hard. Emotional reactivity is not that. It's something very, very different from that. People who are emotionally reactive kind of carry a little corner behind them, like an imaginary corner. And if they begin to feel that they're misunderstood, or people don't care, or they
Mhm.
feel rejected unfairly, or they start to get cornered, and almost as if they're fighting for their lives,
Mhm.
come out swinging. And at that particular moment in time, they can't see the person they're yelling at. They just are vomiting pain, anger, hurt, all of those kind of things. And they're unable to be reached in any way at all. They push their partners away, then they pull them back. They, don't go away, but don't touch me. They're very difficult to talk to. They can't listen to reason. Um, as I said, they're usually angry or wounded or scared. But this fighting for a corner place, they become very aggressive. They say really mean things that they don't mean. It's almost like they're trying to transfer their distress, internal distress, to the other person. It's almost like, take it from me. But they can't feel any compassion, any support for the other person during that time. That person has become their enemy because they're projecting all of this internal heartbreak onto the person who's with them. They feel misunderstood. They have to right their wrongs. They are blaming because they feel they've been blamed, and they're trying to reversing that blame. They're defending themselves as if they're being forced to live on a witness stand, defending their rights, defending their goodness, defending their values, defending their morals. They just come out swinging, and almost anything can set it off at any time. Often afterwards, almost like an epileptic seizure, they don't even remember what they said. I've had couples sometimes where they'll agree to be taped, and afterwards they'll say, I don't even recognize myself. It doesn't even sound like me. How could I say things like that? But during the moments of these explosive episodes, all they look like is they look like a trapped animal that has to kill to avoid being killed. Um, Partners try really hard. Honey, calm down. Can I really help you? No. They can't control their emotions. They are just literally out of control, and like bleeding from every single orifice. Um, when I talked to them later, they said, how did you feel? I felt powerless. I had to fight for my life. And I know it was wrong. But sometimes they're so embarrassed by that behavior that they'll deny it later. Or, you made me do it. Or, I would never have blown up if you hadn't done this and this and this and this to me. When they are threatened, this explosive, dramatic vomiting comes out. So if you have a partner who you can work with, who understands it's not about them, who doesn't take it personally, who doesn't say to them, wait, you're not telling the truth, this and this and this and this and happen. You try to talk them out of it anyway, you are literally fueling that explosion. It's going to go on and on and on and on. So when a person has had a lot of failed relationships, very often they are people who are these emotionally dramatic, reactive human beings. Now, at other times and places, they can be sweet, they can be wonderful, they can be kind, but it's almost, as I said, it comes over them almost like a seizure. They cannot control themselves. So when people, are first together and the person has a lot of beautiful qualities, that man or woman who's with them kind of, it forgives them and says, well, we'll work on this together, whatever it is. But if it happens over a long period of time and that person, that partner feels completely and totally impotent, they have no power to stop them. They don't even know how they get started. And if the partner won't admit, won't acknowledge, won't say they're sorry, continues to blame afterwards, I never would have done that if you hadn't, ... That relationship is doomed to fail. And very often when I'm with people who have had, as I said, multiple relationships, they have been emotionally reactive, explosive people. And just, the internal heartbreak that these people experience is awful. So we're going to talk a little bit about what causes emotional reactivity. Why do people become that way? Are they born that way? Are they the little kids who are going along fine at the zoo and all of a sudden they don't get ice cream and they lie on the floor and cry for 2 hours and scream and yell? And were they born that way? Is it nature and nurture that we talk about? Mostly it's environment, as we're finding out more and more and more. But how do they become that way? Well, very often they are dealing with an underlying depression. It's never been addressed, never been looked at, or unresolved grief. And that's kind of always there, eating away at their internal sense of self. Because depression has symptoms where people will say, what's the point? Or they'll can't figure out what to do, or they were, sleep a lot, or whatever it is. But if people have ongoing depression that's never been treated, they can have that trigger where all of a sudden they can't bear the feelings they are having and they have to blame it on somebody. So you always want to look at underlying depression and wonder if it's there, if it needs to be treated. And as I said a few minutes ago, unresolved grief. When people lose somebody that they desperately love and they don't work through it, don't work through the grief. They bury it and bury it and bury it, but it's always underneath. They feel cheated, they feel taken from, their spirit is broken, they're angry at the world for what they've had to endure. So if the person with them even threatens a little bit that they might leave them or they might be facing another loss, all of a sudden they'll start this explosive kind of behavior coming from the pain, that the anticipated grief and the memories of the grieving is ungrieved. Another reason, there are personality disorders. Now, I'm not a fan of blaming or locking people in or labeling, because mostly those labels are used to help us know how to treat things. But there is a cluster that is in the DSM that we call it kind of the dramatic cluster. These people have emotions very close to the surface. And generally under stress, they will regress to about an adolescent age of 15 and a little kid age of 3 or 4. So they're not acting young, they actually regressed to that level because both those ages are sort of very highly socially developing ages. And if they didn't go right, people will regress back to those ages. So when people are exploding, they often don't feel the age they feel. They feel younger, helpless, powerless, failing, sometimes even suicidal. So the personality disorder that is most aligned with these explosive, dramatic reactivity patterns is borderline personality, which is often taken a very bad rap because borderline personality disorders occur in people who cannot bear rejection or the fear of abandonment at all, and they cannot regulate their emotions if they feel unsafe. So if people inherit this borderline personality disorder, they have to actually learn how to care for themselves during an emotional outbreak. They have to learn how to regulate emotions, because they once they get going, as I said, like the seizure, they have no control to stop it. So when people have borderline disorder, if they do, they really need a special kind of caring and help. And there was a book written a long time ago called, I Hate You, Don't Leave Me. But it blamed the borderline. Now we're looking at the fact that these people have such internalized anguish, Ryan, that they can't stop it. The anguish has to work its way to the surface like an abscess.
Mm-hmm.
It explodes. Another thing that causes this is an inability to handle stress. Stress is just having too much coming at you too quickly that you have to either deal with, or you can't deal with, or you can't leave something, you can't fix it, you can't bear it. So when people get caught up in this entrapment, very often it'll be like it rises and rises and rises and rises, and then again they can't stop it, and it goes off. It just goes off like a rocket. Unresolved conflicts. Some people just live in terrible conflict of being one kind of person wishing they were another kind of person, and the conflict eventually, like the other, works its way to the surface. And they're terribly afraid that they're going to be seen as the bad guy, terrified of blame, terrified of punishment, terrified of exile, clingy, terrified, trapped. Those are the things that push this kind of behavior. So I ask people, if you are having this happen in your relationships, how do you change that? How can you change it? Well, one of the things I said is you can get what they call dialectical behavior therapy, which is nothing about going into your past, just teaching people how to regulate emotions, find out what they exist in the body, wonder when they start, recognize them earlier, let some of that stuff out a little bit at a time, find other ways to say things which are not blaming somebody. I'm aching, I feel like I'm going to explode, is much better than this is what you did to me. So they teach a person how to express it that doesn't kind of push their partners away. Self-compassion. I tell people, you hate the other person because you hate yourself. Do you understand that some of this is really unbearable and it's not your fault?
Mm-hmm.
You're still going to be held accountable for the behavior. But you have to have compassion, because most of these people, when I talk to them, most of them are really kind, good people inside. They're not vicious, narcissistic people who get off hurting other people at all, but they're seen that way. Because once they go off on one of these dramatic explosions, they're out for blood. And that's what people will perceive as who they really are. Most often, they are not. So self-compassion, understanding what's pushing them. Trauma from childhood, unresolved issues like we talked about. We need to get deeper, because we need to understand what the drivers are. There are drivers that are pushing you to these explosions. If you don't know them, you can't fix what you can't see. So it's very, very difficult for these people because during this therapeutic process, where you're actually helping them get down to some of this, it sometimes triggers an explosion.
Mm-hmm.
And the patient will actually explode at me. And what I do metaphorically, as I step to the side, I let it go by me. I don't argue. I don't defend. I don't talk over them. I don't tell them they shouldn't be doing that. I just let it go by me and wait until they calm down. And very often, people would, in my profession, they use these memes that you have in every profession. Borderlines walk out and slam the door and then sue you for abandonment. It's because of that horrible mixture of feelings that's going on all the time. Go away. No, don't leave me. Go away. Don't leave me. I hate you. But no, I don't really hate you. That results in something like that. Trying to teach them to not project their prior trauma onto their partner. Like I said, you can change the way you say things. I feel like I'm exploding. I'm feeling like my insides are going to melt. I feel so much pain. It's so much better than saying, because what you just did to me, da, 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 da. Once you make it into this relationship and project it, you're going to lose your partner over time, who has no way to help you. No way to help you unless they understand it, or you pick a partner that understands it. And believe it or not, there are sometimes two people who marry each other who are both emotional reactors. And it's like Virginia Woolf. That's when you see the horrendous arguments that we have witnessed in the media and things like that. Trying to get them to understand that some of their feelings of injustice and unfairness not only come from childhood, but they feel unfairly blamed when they blow up because they feel that nobody understands. Nobody gets it. So they don't know what to do with those feelings. I teach them to ask them for what they need in the moment rather than telling somebody that's horrible. Try to reach out. What do you need right now? I don't know.
Right.
Well, just be, that's the 4-year-old.
Yeah.
50-year-old is like, well, I don't know what I need. I mean, but you can feel the regression. You can feel they're not in their mature place. They've lost who they are. And they're desperately reaching out for somebody to love them and pushing it away with everything they have at the same time. I want them to allow themselves to feel they're deserving of love. Their behavior is not, but they are as a person. And here's the way I would sort of sum it up. All of us have a child inside of us. All of our lives.
All of us as what?
Have a child inside of us.
Okay.
When that child has been beaten or neglected or unfair against or not listened to or whatever it is, that child has an internalized dialogue with a mean parent, which they go to over and over again. You as an adult have to be the kind parent to the child in you who pushes the mean parent internalized process out. You have to say to the child in you when you're up against a difficult situation, get behind me, I'll handle this. And thrust a 4-year-old or an angry, anguished 15-year-old into the hands of somebody who's going to hurt them again. There are people, many people, who recover from being an emotionally dramatic, blowing up individual. But it can't come from the partner. It has to come from your own internal transformation. I'm worth loving. My behavior is despicable at times. It's not who I am. How can I see it coming sooner? How can I ask for the help I need rather than internally blame everybody because they weren't there at the right time for me when they didn't even know? I said, when you can take care of the child in you, you're going to start that healing process. So now do you understand better what emotional reactivity is?
Yes. The word sounds so big, but actually everybody has it.
Reactive, rather than intentional. It's reactive to what's going on inside of them and what's going on that they imagine is going on too.
Is that the same thing as like what do you call that? It's not intuition, but subliminal. No, it's something that's just inside of you, right? That you don't know why it's happening.
They don't. Well, not only that, but again, they turn into fiendish people while it's happening, and then they push people away when they most need them.
Right.
So reactive rather than intentional. You think of yourself hanging onto the tail of a horse rather than being on the saddle with the reins in your hands. Because they react to what they imagine is happening to them and they have no control over that reactivity. So explosive, emotional explosive, maybe is closer.
Wow, that's a great topic. I think a lot of people will find that
I hope so, because
in them, not knowing that it's defined that way.
Yeah, well, I'm glad because you know, as I said, they're really hard people initially to get to trust you in therapy because they're waiting for you to make a mistake and push them into that place. It's so important not to take it personally. If you're in a relationship with somebody who explodes like that, oh, it's not about you. You just sort of sit there quietly and just don't take it in, or don't defend it, or don't push back, or don't get angry.
Right.
You just kind of be still and let the person work through that seizure. And then they'll usually start to cry. Men, not so much crying, but they'll get very quiet. Women tend to cry more. But men can cry too. I've seen it. They fall apart afterwards, like they have no defenses.
Right.
And sometimes they'll cover when they fall apart. Well, I didn't do that. Why are you taking it so personally? I didn't mean that. They won't even admit it. And that, of course, is going to really push the other person away over time. Because they feel so horrible about what they've done that they can't even say, I'm sorry.
All right, Dr. Randy, this is a great topic. Where can your audience find you? More information about you.
Well, certainly this podcast site, which is Randy Gunther YouTube. Love your comments. At Randy Gunther at cox.net. Randy Gunther, all lowercase, one word, Randy with an I. You can give me topics you'd like me to talk on or make comments back to me. I'd be thrilled. I also have every one of the 252 articles I've written for Psychology Today on their own site, sorted by subject, and that's relationshipsactually.org. Please feel free to peruse. I think that's pretty much everywhere you can find me.
Great. Thank you. And we'll see you next week, Dr. Randy.
Sounds wonderful. Thanks, Ryan.
Bye.
Bye.